Today's video, I'm going to tell you why, as a beginner in the gym, you should focus on building size rather than focusing on strength. So size, building size rather than strength. And to a lot of people, it might seem like they're the same thing, but they're actually two different things. So you have size, which is basically how big the muscles are. Then you have strength. So how strong. And they're two separate things. Someone that has larger muscles, someone that's big, will also be strong, but someone that is strong will not necessarily be big. They don't always correlate. So the 4 reasons I think as a beginner you should focus on size rather than strength is the fundamentals, injury risk, much lower barrier of entry, and you still get stronger. So I'll break up each of those now. So first we had the fundamentals. Alrighty, so starting with the fundamentals. What do I mean by this? Fundamentals. This is basically the most basic components of training. So you have things like volume. You have things like intensity. So I'll go through this. Volume is the sets, and then intensity is basically how hard you're pushing in the gym. You also have the movement patterns, which is basically a fancy way of saying what the exercise that you're training is. So if you know a little bit about lifting weights, you will have heard of squats or bench press, deadlifts. But really, these fundamentals are around these movement patterns are just basic things that you sort of need to be competent with before you start doing strength work, in my opinion. You can't get really strong at squats without knowing how to do the basics of a squat. You can't get really strong at bench pressing without sort of doing bench pressing lighter, but understanding how to do it. Same as volume, figuring out how sets work, how intensity works, and how your body reacts to all of those. So by focusing on size, you're basically building this pyramid here. And that's going to be your fundamental skills. Which I think are much, much better to build doing like a bodybuilding style of training, where you train for maximum size rather than strength. Then once you have those fundamentals, you can go and do lots of other things. You can go do sport-specific training. You can go do body weight only training. You can go do strength training like powerlifting, or you can go do strongman. So like when they lift up the big stones or they throw kegs in the air, you already have these sort of fundamentals, and then you can build on top of those fundamentals and go towards sport or calisthenics or strength. But it's about building that fundamental base. Alrighty, the next reason I think people should start by focusing on size rather than strength is injury risk. So what do I mean by this? Well, when you train for size and when you train for strength, they're two very different things. They're two very different things. So when you train for size, let me write that down, size, you're training slow with many repetitions and with light weights. Put that in inverted commas, light weights. You can do 8 reps of this weight, you can do 10 reps, you can do 25 reps. It's more about building the muscle, because ultimately your goal is to build the muscle as big as possible. This is your goal. If you do it with 5 kilos or 20 kilos, it doesn't matter. Like, the weight really is irrelevant to the goal. And most of the time you'll find that the lighter the weight, the better it is, because it's less fatiguing. So once you get good at it, you go for a lighter weight. You see how light of a weight you can use while still getting the desired result, rather than how heavy can you go and still do the movement. So two different things. And then training for strength is what can be fast, can be slow, fast or slow. Usually very small number of reps. So 1 through to 5 is the number of reps. And because it's strength, you don't care about how big the muscles are, you care about how heavy is that weight. So let's think, if you're new to something, or if you're new to lifting weights and you are going to make mistakes, your technique is going to be slightly off, or it won't be great. You won't know how to fail effectively. So when you can't get the weight up, you won't know what to do. So would it be better if you fail with a light weight, like in bodybuilding training, or something that's like double your body weight, something really heavy? It would definitely be the light weight. Because if something goes wrong with the light weight, it's still only, 10 kilos, or something that it's still only a light weight, so it can't injure you very much relative to something heavy, where you can move a lot of weight, and if something goes wrong, then you're going to end up injured. So because people will make mistakes, it's just part of it. Everyone's made mistakes. They've failed squats, or they've failed on squats, they've failed on deadlifts, they've done a shoulder press incorrectly. If you're doing light weights, the consequences are nowhere near as bad as if you're doing something heavy weights. Alrighty, the third reason that you should focus on size rather than strength as a beginner is the barrier to entry. So again, I'll split it up. So with training for size, it's pretty simple. There's not that much to know. It's more doing it and getting good at some basics. So it's very basic training. You also don't need very much equipment if you know what you're doing. So decrease equipment. Like you can get a great chest just from doing push-ups if you use good technique and good form and you follow the basic fundamentals, so like progressive overload, so I suppose it's just a much more simple way of training. It's very simple. And anyone can do it. You don't really need any special equipment. It does help to have knowledge, but it's so yeah, ultimately it's a very simple way of training. Now if you have strength training up here, so again this is like how much can you squat, how much can you deadlift, how strong are you. There's actually a fair bit of technique. So the difference between someone who can squat a lot and someone who can squat much more, it may be muscle, it may be size, but often it is skill. How skilled are they at that specific lift? The other thing for strength is you do tend to need a fair bit of equipment because you need heavy weights. It needs to be heavy. It's much harder to get stronger at something like squats or deadlifts if you have no weights available or you don't have lifting belts, like those sort of things that the guys put on, keep their back flat, weightlifting shoes, spotters. There is a fair bit more involved. You need a fair bit more equipment to get strong. So that is another barrier to entry. The final reason is that once you get past a very basic level of strength, it is a lot more science, I suppose. You'll train, so this would be called a periodization is the fancy word for it. I think this is a shun. So this is basically where you do different styles of training. So you might do something heavy, you might do some fast, you might do some bodybuilding sort of stuff. But so you need to know about how to do all of these safely and effectively. So sort of coming back to the other point of injury risk, you need to be able to do these three training methods of heavy, fast, and like bodybuilding training safely, and it also needs to be effective. So you need to know like which muscles are you targeting, which movements are you doing, is it a heavy day or is it a light day? It's all more like this, undulating, slowly going up, but it is undulating. Meanwhile, bodybuilding training is basically, if this is time along the bottom here, you just kind of go along the same steady upward slope. Like it's much more linear, I suppose. And all you have to do is basically keep showing up, keep lifting weights, keep eating, keep sleeping, and then your progress will keep going up. So I'll just put progress. But that will not work for strength as well as it will with bodybuilding training. So that is part of reason number 4, barrier to entry. Now the final reason that a beginner should focus on size rather than strength when they first get into the gym is for this reason. So for 4, you still get strong. If you think of strength as sort of this equation, you have the size of the muscle and the nervous system. And then that equals max weight. There is a little bit more to this equation, like nervous system. You might have skill level here, which would play a part in that. There we go. But most of it, strength training is mainly developing the nervous system, and bodybuilding training is making the muscles, so the size. We want to make the size of the muscles as big as possible. So if we make the size bigger and this stays the exact same, then the end result is the max weight still goes up because we've increased the size of the muscle a lot through bodybuilding training. Jesus. So you look big, but sorry. So you look big, and the strength still goes. Look big, and the strength still goes. What on earth is happening with this? So with bodybuilding training, you look big because the muscles have gotten bigger, and the max weight also goes up. Ultimately, the nervous system hasn't really, nothing much has happened here. This has all been basically the same. It might have gone up a little bit, but it's more or less the same. But the output of how much weight you lift has in fact gone up, even though you haven't done any real proper strength training like powerlifting. You've just been focusing on the size. So in summary, it is focusing on size allows you to develop the fundamentals, which you will need to develop in order to progress you further in your lifting journey. If you want to take it into sport, or if you want to take it into real strength training like powerlifting or calisthenics, or you just want to keep doing bodybuilding, or you want to do something totally different, you've still built those fundamentals. So you've sort of learned how your body reacts. You've learned about volume and intensity. You've learned about the different ways your body can move. So you've built the fundamentals, and you've built those fundamentals in the safest way possible. It should have probably been at the top, but injury risk. Because you're training with the bodybuilding style, it's very lightweight. So injury risk is very low, which means it's much harder to properly injure yourself seriously. So you'll have a second year in the gym. You have a third year in the gym. You'll have a long lifting career, which will allow you to get bigger, which will allow you to get stronger. But if you go in there, lift heavy, and you don't know what you're doing, which, let's be real, you don't, the likelihood of you getting injured is very high. And if you get seriously injured, the likelihood that you keep going to the gym is very low. So that is the second reason, and arguably the biggest reason. The third reason I think people should focus on size rather than strength when they start the gym is the barrier to entry. So training a bodybuilding style is much more simpler. You basically just start and then try and improve a little bit every week, and that's kind of all there is to it. Obviously, you have to keep going. You can't sort of start and then stop, because then you'll start there and stop again. Then you go up a bit and you go, fuck this. Now you take a couple months break. So basically nothing has happened over the long period of time. But if you start and you keep going, your trajectory will be up. and it'll be fairly linear. Strength training, once you get past a basic level, you have to know much more about training, and it's not always, your max weight isn't always going up. It'll go up and then it'll go down and then it'll go up and then it'll go down. It's much more undulating, and there's much more knowledge required to keep that trend graph going up. So many people will start well and then they'll just basically plateau because they don't have the knowledge. And the final reason, which is probably the most important to beginners, is you still get way stronger. So we said the muscle, like the equation for strength was muscle size and then nervous system, like how good your body is at using its muscles and sort of firing them to the maximum capacity, equals strength. There we go. So if we increase the muscle size, we're also increasing the strength. And yes, you could train the nervous system with strength training, but then you don't look big. But you have gotten stronger. I think most people want to be big and strong. So if you focus on size and that increases, then your strength will also increase. Hope that was useful. Let me know what you want to see next.